Hi class, this is Dr. Spagnolo. I just want to do a quick check-in video with you all in regards to the last forum that you participated in on evidence-based practices. I was able to read all of Group 2's responses, and so in order to give you some feedback, I figured I would capture it on this short video rather than typing into the forums. So there were a lot of interesting questions raised, some a little bit more basic than others, but a couple of them really required a lot of thought and application, and also thinking through of what some of the implications are when studying evidence-based practices. So I'm going to go through them quickly, not mentioning any specific person, but rather just kind of using this as a summative reflection on what went on in the forum. So firstly, we had some of the students talking about the mandatory nature of evidence-based practices and what is preventing us as service providers from requiring that evidence-based practices be put into place. Others talked about some of the fidelity issues surrounding evidence-based practices, like what types of fidelity measures would you all suggest if you were trying to measure the outcomes of a program? Also, what are some of the differences between the best practices and the evidence-based practices, and what additional requirements would you like to see in order to promote fidelity to the evidence-based practices, and what is the importance of fidelity? So those were all interesting questions, and I think very relevant to the reading. Some of you also mentioned a little bit more in-depth types of issues. One in particular was what might the Medicaid reform have effect on evidence-based practices and fidelity, and then also how generally that we can make sure evidence-based practices are leading to positive outcomes. So obviously these are really complicated topics. You noticed in your readings that the emphasis on fidelity is really to ensure that programs are faithfully adhering to specific models or evidence-based practices to ensure that the outcomes desired are actually attained. That in and of itself can be a very interesting conversation. We know that many agencies are providing supported employment services, for example, but are we sure that they're all using the evidence-based practice approach, which is individualized placement and support? Another example is that agencies are providing housing services, but do they all meet the criteria to establish themselves as a supportive housing program? And that's something to examine by looking at what their practices are and seeing how closely they match the ideal model. Another example can be PACT, and we know that faithful adherence to the PACT model means that there is a 10-to-1 client to staff ratio. Well, if one staff person is providing services to 20 folks, is it still matching the model? And the answer is no. So there is not faithful adherence if the client to staff ratio is not correct. So all of these things contribute to a model's to the fidelity agencies are adhering to a specific model. I think one of the challenges that we might want to explore taking a little bit more time to think through is how does reimbursement affect the quality of services and the ability of an agency to faithfully implement a specific practice. We'll see that come to life a little bit more here in New Jersey over the next year, now that we have a fee-for-service structure in place and the rates have been determined for the reimbursement of these services. So I think that that's going to be an evolving or emerging trend to watch for. One of the things that I'd like for you all to do is to go back to your question and take a look at what your classmates have responded. If you didn't have a response for many of your classmates, that's okay. What I'd like for you to do is to write the real answer, the right answer, and to be mindful of citing your sources. So some of you asked a question and provided a reference for where you got the idea or the background information, and others did not. So in your answer, it would be great if you can cite your source and let the rest of the class know where you found your information in both creating your question and then providing us with the correct answer. Also, if somebody in your class did give you the right answer, please indicate that in the discussion forum thread so that we can give that individual credit for getting it right. If you have any questions, please shoot me a message or post something in the forum. And I hope next week is as interesting as this one has been.